Welcome to the 12th episode of StreamCast with me, James Rutherford, also known as Charizard James, on Twitch and other social media platforms, where we take a deep dive into the lives of all your favorite streamers and content creators. Joining with us today is the marvelous and fantastic Mason Clark. Take a minute to introduce yourself.
Well, what a great way to introduce me, and thanks for having me on the show to start things off. Marvelous and fantastic. Probably a little much, but I'm going to put it in my journal. I liked it a lot. Now, you might know me as the host of Constructive Criticism. It's a Magic the Gathering podcast focused on improvement. I've been hosting that for a little while now. That show's been going on for a while. I also write for Card Kingdom each and every week, and I'm on Team Nova MTG for the SCG Tour predominantly on that area, so you might know me from over there. And I do stream every Monday through Thursday at twitch.tv/TheMasonClark when my computer isn't broken and we're not using a laptop we bought at Best Buy for the podcast here.
Or you don't buy your laptop at a garage sale or something like that. You know, you gotta figure out that it works before you get it, Mason.
I just need it for a couple days till this my computer gets back for me. So hey, this is good enough. And Best Buy 15 days, no questions asked return policy. What more could you want?
Oh wow, that's awesome. Yeah, you definitely haggled them at that garage sale for 10% off for sure.
No doubt.
No, it's all right.
You're ruining your Best Buy sponsorship potential, by the way.
Best Buy sponsorship.
You're slashing them.
Oh wow, you're killing it out here. You're doing all these things and a Best Buy sponsorship. All right, I mean I'm talking to the right person then.
Apparently.
All right, let's go ahead and talk about some things that you just mentioned. Talk about. I know that you're on Twitch as Mason Esports Clark. If you'd like to look him up on Twitch, that's his name. Talk about your background in esports and talk about some companies that you're affiliated with that you just got done mentioning.
Sure. So I guess when it comes to the esports stuff, I'm on Team Nova, which is a SCG team that plays in those circuits. You probably know some of the members like Harlan Fear or Matt Dilks. Those are two kind of, the bigger players on that team. Aaron Baird used to be on there. Mythic Meebo at one point was on. It's kind of like the counter to Lotus Box. We're kind of like the Cloud9 to their TSM if you follow other esports. So that's that sort of thing. And then I write for Card Kingdom, which I'm sure your listeners have probably bought cards from, or we're seeing the other people they sponsor, like the Professor, Game Night, stuff like that. I write predominantly content targeted at standard and more specifically arena formats for them every Thursday. And it will normally be strategy articles or something like a deck list or the popular tier lists that I do that are like what you should be playing on ladder at this point. And that's sort of those things.
Well, that's a lot of things to be affiliated with. I did hear before the podcast here that you have done your own podcast. You do one called Constructed Criticism that you were talking about before, but you don't just have like a couple weeks into it. You don't have a couple months into it. You don't have like a year's worth into it. Talk about how many episodes you've done. How many weekly episodes you have.
So there's 355 episodes of the podcast with a 356 in the can ready to go. The podcast has been going on since Theros. I actually joined the show around the 120, 140 mark, somewhere in there. So I used to play a card game very competitively called Card Fight Vanguard. And I was good at that, and I played it a bunch. I didn't really like the direction that game was going, and so I kind of transitioned over to Magic. And when I transitioned over to Magic, I wanted to get into content and really catch up. And I listened to that podcast. They needed a little help with something, so I joined to help out with the show. And then I stayed behind the scenes and edited that podcast. And I used to edit Proven Combatants as well, which is a podcast maybe some of your listeners know. Autumn Burchett was a co-host of that for a while. And I did that for a long time. And then I went and did some other stuff. And now I'm back and I'm the host of the show instead of someone kind of behind the scenes who are like maybe a guest host every now and again like I was before. And yeah, I've been running it for about a year and a half at this point. And that's it. And our podcasts have a lot of different hosts on it. We had Mythic Meebo, Allie Warfield for a while. She actually, unfortunately, just left. We had John Stern, Seth Manfield. We had Michael Hinderocker of Play Design. We've had a lot of really great players come through those doors, and it's kind of an honor to get to keep doing that. And, the Constructed Criticism Network as well has a bunch of other podcasts on it that all run through us. So, like Sam's Black's Drafting Archetypes. I don't know if you've heard that podcast. Sam recently joined the network, so Sam has his own show on the same sort of hub. Same for Common Knowledge, which is a podcast predominantly targeted at competitive popper play. We like to have those clever names, Constructed Criticism, Common Knowledge. But yeah, that's basically it when it comes to the podcast.
All right, so talk a little bit more in depth about your podcast. What do you what is I know you're based on constructed gameplay, and you know, I don't know if it's necessarily about criticizing certain gameplays or whatever, but
No, no.
no. But talk about
Anything.
the premise of your podcast and what are some subjects that have been your favorite that you've talked about?
Sure. So the premise of the podcast is always improving. We really kind of focus on the act of always wanting to get better, not only at Magic, but at life itself, and kind of work on ourselves in other ways. And we make that a big point of the show. Every week we start off the podcast talking about how we worked on improving ourselves in some way over the last week. And we kind of mention that. And a lot of times it's Magic based, but sometimes it's stuff as simple as, dieting or making sure to do those other things. And I find those things work the way back to Magic. But really what our podcast is targeted at and what we're trying to help is there are a lot of people out there who want to make the step from like the local competitive scene, like your winner boxes, maybe your 1K and stuff like that. And they do really well there. And they want to take the step up to like SCGs, IQs, GPs, that sort of thing. And that step's a really big step. It's one that doesn't seem that huge, but it's a big jump. And it can be really hard to make that sort of jump and start to get those level up moments and those lessons learned if you don't have someone that's already made that step for you. I know I wouldn't be where I am today without my friends like Trey and James that really helped pull me up and like kind of gave me a kick in the pants and that flung me ahead of where I should have been at the time. And one of the things that we hope to do on the podcast is to help teach lessons that would do that. So one of the main things we do is training grounds, which are these sort of lecture-based / things that we think will be helpful for you to improve at Magic that aren't always gameplay based. Now, sometimes the training grounds is something like this last week where we sort of just talked about the standard metagame. But 2 weeks ago, we did an episode I really liked where we kind of talked about how to improve at the act of improving. And it was when we had Abe join, who was the new co-host of the show. And what we had there is we kind of sat down, we talked about like, how do we work on improving? How do we spend our time efficiently? And we kind of laid out some ways that you can maybe be a little bit more time efficient when it comes to improving at Magic. Like a great example I love to give is people always say it's really hard to figure out sideboard plans and it's really hard to understand sideboarding. And I agree, sideboarding is one of the hardest parts in Magic. But a thing that I really find helpful that I can fit into my schedule in my life, because I work a full-time job, is that I'll sometimes look at a sideboard of a deck I want to play or something, and I will think about how I want to do it, right? So I'll write my own little sideboard guide, and then I'll go and I'll find content from someone that I know is good or good at that deck, and then see how they sideboard, and then I'll compare the notes, and then I'll read their article and their reasoning as to why. So I basically pretend that I'm going to give them a sideboard guide, and then I, see what they say, and then see what that lines up, what doesn't. I use that as a way to improve, and I'm able to fit that in, during my lunch break at work, and then I can fit it in when I get home, and bam, I've been really more efficient with my time than watching the newest Ludwig video on YouTube or whatever. And so that's kind of how the show operates. So we'll kind of spend like 50% of the time on the formats and 50% of the time of the various formats in Magic, of course, and 50% on improvement.
That's awesome. What do you think is one of the biggest mental leaps that you can make in order to make the jump from maybe being 1 or 2 losses shy of maybe top 8 at an SCG tournament to actually making that jump and starting to do well in tournaments like FCGs and IQs and things like that?
I think there are probably 2 big things. The one thing I always kind of talk about, and a lot of lessons start with this, is you kind of have to know what your goals are in Magic, right? Like if you don't know what your goals are, then it's going to be really hard to figure out what's best for you, right? Like if you tell me your goal is to hit platinum every month in Arena, that's a much different goal than I want to play the Pro Tour consistently, right? And neither goal is wrong. Both goals can be good, but we need to figure out where we are at that. So understanding what our goals are in Magic is super important. So to give you an example to the listeners, this has always been my goal in every game I've played competitively, everything that is. I want to be the best that I can at that game. And when I finish and when my time's done with Magic, and I believe Magic will outlive me. So when I'm done playing Magic, whatever point that is in my life, I want to look back and be proud of the work I put in. I want to be proud of my results. I want to be proud of my preparation and stuff for that. And I want to look back and be happy because I've been one of the best people at a game before. I know what that's like. And I have those memories. And I know that I did my best with Vanguard. And I'm happy about that. And I want to do the same for Magic. So that's my goal. So when I play these tournaments, I just want to make sure that I'm doing my best. So it's win or lose. If I tried my hardest, if I did what I could in my preparation, I'm, pretty happy with the results regardless. Obviously, losing top 8s is going to hurt or whatever, but that sort of thing happens. The second thing is to remember it's a marathon, not a race. So I think what happens with a lot of players, especially when it's your first time, and hey, raise your hand if you've been there. I know I was. When you get in these positions and you're like, this is it. I'm in top 8. I'm in top 8 contention. I'm going to make it. This is going to be my first top 8. And it could be anything, right? It could be a PPTQ, a PTQ, RPTQ, MIQ, whatever, right? You're in that position. You're like, oh my gosh, this is the moment. Everything matters here. And then you get a little anxious. Maybe your blood starts pumping a little more. Maybe you're not thinking as clearly. And then, you make a small mistake and you lose. Or maybe things don't go your way and you played really well, but sometimes, playing well doesn't always guarantee a victory. It means it a lot of time, but not always, right? And so understanding that one result will not define your life. Winning that one tournament, no matter how big it is, doesn't define your life or your value as a person. It's just another thing that adds to it, right? I know that for me, right, like when I top 8 my first SCG, it's not like Mason's a better person or a better player now. I'm the same person I was 50 minutes ago before we won that round, right? It's the same thing. And I know in the moment it doesn't feel that way, but it really matters, I think, to keep a level head on those sort of things. And I also think it's cool to be excited when you're happy and that sort of thing. So don't think you have to become some heartless robot to be good at Magic. But remember that it's all your results together are what matter in the end of the day. And the one little result doesn't define you as a person. So
that's awesome.
That'd be my biggest tip. Yeah,
those are some good tips right there. And I know that in my personal experience with being a competitive Yu-Gi-Oh player and rising to the top of the food chain in that game, if you will, there's these things called YCSs, which are called Yu-Gi-Oh Championship Series, and
I played a little Yu-Gi-Oh back in the day.
I played little YCSs. So they're similar to like your Pro Tours or your whatever big tournament in Magic. They all have different names nowadays, or Grand Prix. Kind of similar to that. There's a couple 3,000-4,000 people in the tournament. I got in third place in one of those, and I've topped
YCS Memphis, right?
Yeah, it was YCS Memphis. I've done pretty well in tournaments. I had my share of top 8 regional events and top cut, all these YCSs. And I can really say for me, if I had to answer that question that I gave you before, what's the jump? I think it's really all. It's two things. I think it's just a mental jump is what you're getting at. I think the physical jump is, as far as like actual gameplay is concerned. I think the mental shift is like one of the biggest ones is don't get tilted. I think a lot of people they say, okay, well, I have to win X amount of rounds like in a row to make it to top cut, whether it's top 8, top 32, whatever it is, whatever the cutoff is. Like, I've definitely been in the spot where I've been like 2-2 in the first 4 rounds, and I had to win like 9 matches in a row to make top cut, and I've made it into top cut that way. And because I basically just like play the match. If I lose, okay, I realize in that moment, okay, I have to win out, and then everything in that position and forward in the next matches is just like a regular match. Like, you can't think of it as like, this is super important. Like, every single action I take has dire consequences. Like, you can't really put yourself in that frame of mind, or you're probably just gonna you're gonna like, I don't know how to explain it.
You're gonna stress.
You're just gonna stress and tilt out and make a mistake that you probably would have never made. And it's just the mental aspect of that's super important. The physical aspect of it is like in your preparation. I think it's in your preparation. Mm-hmm. It's in how did you test for certain matchups? Did you like, because you could lose matches because you didn't play as like perfectly or whatever as you were supposed to, but you can also lose matches because you didn't see a certain interaction before. And I think that in your prep, if you had put in the time into preparing, you might have seen that interaction and treated the whole situation differently. Even if it's just not a 1-card interaction, maybe it's just a whole matchup interaction. Maybe like you weren't supposed to sideboard in this way at all, and you were supposed to just transition your deck into playing a different way post sideboard, and you didn't know that because you don't have the reps playing against that deck. And that's the
format knowledge is the big thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's a player that I know of personally that's a much better than me technically, but they don't put anything or hardly anything into their preparation, and they just enter a big tournament. Like, yes, they're better than mostly everybody, but since they didn't put that effort in beforehand, they end up number one, tilting, and number two, things seem to like happen negatively for them, and the reason why they lost is because they didn't prepare. So I think it has less to do with like your actual physical match right now, because one match doesn't mean that much. And you losing you could play perfectly and lose, just like you said, Mason. Or a bunch of things can happen why you lose, but at the end of the day, it's a 1 match sample size. Like you see all these decks are like tier 1 in the meta, and they have like 64.7 win percent. And you can look at all the win percentages, right? But at the end of the day, you can play perfectly, and that 64.7 win percentage could also just flip the other way around in the 35.3%. Even if you play perfectly, you can just lose. So you have to think about it in that lens too, as of like, okay, well, things just weren't supposed to happen for me in this game. And that's completely fine. This is a 1 match sample size. What do you have to say about that?
I think that's super true. It's super important. I think that plays into it's a marathon, not a race, right? It's not this 100-meter dash, this one thing, And I think sometimes, to kind of get into the point of like results there, right? Like that 66% win rate deck, right? Like today I went from platinum to diamond undefeated playing a Grixis deck. I'm pretty positive my Grixis deck is not actually that good. But I promise you, I won every match today between Plat 4 and Diamond 4. And so I went undefeated, and like I got there. And so those sort of things can happen. And it doesn't really mean that much, right? Like it can be like, oh, that was really cool. I got to play this sweet Tybalt deck all day today. That was dope, where it can also just be like a thing. I think separating yourself from that and realizing it is super important. And also, it's so funny. You mentioned like you're 2-2 in a tournament. You're like, I got to win 9 more to, to make top 8 or whatever. And it's like, if your plan was to come in top 8 this tournament, you've already got 2 more wins than you knew you had to at the start of the day, right? Like, like you knew going into it, you're going to need to go like 12-3, preferably 13-2, in order to make top 8 of this tournament. You've already got some of the work done. It's great. Did you think it was going to be easy to get 13 wins? Do you think that was just going to be like a walk in the park? What you really get is you have losses to give, right? Like the start of the day, it's not you have 13 wins. It's like you lose round 1. You're like, oh, I had to lost it. Whatever. I lost that one. Cool. I was going to probably lose another. I don't win every game of Magic,
Yep.
So I think that's really big. And in kind of, you mentioned like, what's the biggest mental thing? I think kind of the stuff we talked about there is my voice cracked, which was great.
Perfect.
That's actually a big moment. But another thing is just tight technical play when it comes to like the physical. I think you win a lot of games of Magic just by playing tight technical Magic better than your opponents. You don't need to see some flashy play where you Bone Crusher Giant, your own creature to counter their Bone Crusher Giant, and then you release to the wind your land and replay it. Like you don't need to see like some crazy line that doesn't like, it's a 1 in a billion thing. If you just use your mana efficiently every turn, you don't miss points of damage, you make good attacks, you make good blocks, you will beat 90% of Magic players that way. And I promise you, because I'm not very great, I'm pretty good at Magic. I'm not the greatest in the world, and I win a lot of games of Magic just by like, my opponent made a bad attack there, and they were down 2 points. I got this better block than they saw, and I won because of it. And that's how a lot of games go. And if you talk to people, I've had a lot of conversations with people like PV, and it's like, I win a lot of games because my opponents just made a bad attack or a bad block. It just happens all the time.
It takes one time to make that bad attack too, or attack with one more creature, and then you weren't playing around a certain pump spell, and now you're down to 2, and now you can't attack with this one creature that you're supposed to attack with for lethal. But then if you don't hit lethal, then you could just take lethal in the backswing. So you can end up like shifting the entire game just because you made that one extra bad attack, or you attacked with one extra creature than you were supposed to. You left yourself more vulnerable to that one removal spell, and then they got into for a ton of damage. And if you had just held your creature back, they wouldn't have been able to attack at all.
Yeah. Or maybe if you attacked with more creatures, right? Maybe if you put the pressure on them, they can't attack you back because you're threatening lethal with your own pump spell, right? Like maybe your deck plays an Embercleave. I never heard of that card before.
Weird card.
That sort of thing. Those sort of things happen all the time, right? And like I think that sort of dynamic and thought process doesn't get focused on a lot because it's not very cool and flashy for me to tell you to go eat your vegetables, right? Like it's like that's not, no one's like tuning into the podcast like, wow, this week Mason told me to make good attack and blocks. Wow. This article PV said, hey, make sure to always attack and block well, and here's 5 tips for it. That doesn't sell as well as the other stuff does. So I think that's another big thing as well.
Right. Yeah, I do think that's a big aspect of it. Like a lot of players want to see like the flashy. Here's the next level 5-head thing that you need to be doing, and here's the top 3 ways you can do it. And at the end of the day, it's just mulligan this hand. Don't be greedy. Or
exactly. Yeah.
And I think I heard LSV, or maybe it was someone else. I think it was LSV though, say that he wins a lot of his matches against players that know who he is, because I think he was talking, and it was either an article or maybe it was someone else said it's a disadvantage when someone knows who you are because they know your play styles and they know what deck you're likely to draft if you're in draft with them and things like that. But at the same time, LSV or PVDDR was saying that in some ways it's an advantage because the opponent is going to say, oh my gosh, I'm playing against LSV or PVDDR. I need to mulligan aggressively in order to have it in perfect curve or whatever. And then they mulligan aggressively, and then they lose because they mulligan aggressively.
Like they overdo it, right? Like they have
exactly.
like a 7 out of 10 hand, and like this 7 out of 10 is not good enough.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, PV's looking at this 5 out of 10, like maybe I could keep it. I'm on the draw.
Yeah. If you had just kept the 7 out of 10 hand, you would have won the game.
Yeah, and those sort of things come up a lot too. On my time on the tour, one of the things that happens is once people start to get to like know who you are and stuff, and you play against these people and you realize how good they are and whatnot, you're able to start bluffing and representing things. So one of my favorite stories of this ever happening with my new co-host Abe, and we're playing the Oko Urza mirror in Modern, which I don't know if you've ever played Modern with that, but basically you would have this card called Mystical Dispute and you would play them in your main deck sometime. Yeah, and Abe and I both knew we had main deck Mystical Dispute. And in game one, we both played around Mystical Dispute despite both of us not having Mystical Dispute because our positions were too even to take the risk.
Mm-hmm.
And then post-match, I was like, yeah, I had this Mox Opal. I was just pretending it was Mystical Dispute. And Abe was like, yeah, I think I had like a swamp or whatever in my hand that I said that's Mystical Dispute, Yep. And like we played around it, and like because we played around it, we both respect each other that way. The game played very differently, but also like if I had decided not to respect Abe as a player, or I didn't know who Abe was or whatever, right? Kind of like your thing to PV, and I just slammed my Urza, I definitely would have won because I ended up slamming my Urza first and I won anyways, right? So it's like eventually you kind of get to those spots where these things, they play out in interesting ways, and it's a really cool part of Magic.
There's also a cool part of Magic where you can no longer afford to bluff, right? And if you bluff and then you know that your opponent's forced to jam it, then it's not worth the bluff anymore because your opponent's already forced to jam. So if they jam and you're holding up a bluff, you don't have the bluff, they jam, they win, right? So at some point you have to be like, okay, well if they jam it, I lose, but at this point in the game, they're forced to jam it anyways. Like that actually goes to a good point actually in Standard right now. If you're a Standard player listening to this, and you're playing it Sultai Ultimatum, and you're bluffing Mystical Dispute, just like the conversation we're having now. Instead of in Modern, it's in Standard. You're bluffing that Mystical Dispute, and maybe it's a main deck Mystical Dispute, but you're on the ladder and they don't know your deck list, right? So if you purposely like tap your mana in order to leave one blue mana up, and it's like an island, like your opponent's thinking about it, right? So they might not cast their Emergent Ultimatum, right? But if they're at the point in the game where you're like getting ahead of them in the game and they're just forced to slam it anyways, then you might as well tap that blue mana in order to do a better play on your turn because you know they're forced to slam it.
Exactly right. Like I think this happens a lot where sometimes players forget. Well, there's like a bunch of levels to this, but it starts at the beginning where you play your game and your game plan, and then at some point players realize their opponent has a game plan, and they realize that, right? And they're like, oh, my opponent's a human with thoughts and theories and stuff, and they're going to do things too.
Opponents
yeah, and on MTG Arena Zoomers don't know that. They assume it's only Sparky with a different tag. But I promise you, your opponent's a real person. And maybe not. Maybe it's Liz.
Sparky's
but there's something over on the other side. Exactly. And so they have that happen. But you have to think about it from their position too, right? Like if they lose, if they don't cast Sultai Ultimatum, and you could probably tell this, especially against Sultai, right? Like normally you have a board, they normally don't, right? Like if they're going to die on the next turn, and you could play something onto the battlefield that beats, maybe a Binding of the Old God instead, right? You can then beat that because if you have Mystical Dispute, they lose either way, right? One way they have a chance to win, the other way they have no way of winning. So they're going to make the play that gives them a chance of winning. Mm-hmm. And just things like that, I think, are super important. So
there was an article, or even, actually it was a YouTube video that PVDDR was talking about that aggro players make decisions too. I don't know if you saw that video.
They make more decisions. Yeah. I've been a long believer that aggro players have the harder game.
Right. There's so many times where it's like Smork, you don't think, opponent doesn't have to think, Smork, whatever, turn your card sideways, right? But there was an interesting thing that PV in that video had held up a Bone Crusher Giant mana, okay? I don't even think he had the Bone Crusher Giant, but the opponent is now forced to play around Bone Crusher Giant because you left specific mana up to cast the Bone Crusher. And now he did a specific play, whereas if his opponent attacked, he'd be dead to the Bone Crusher that they now think that he has, but he doesn't have it. So he doesn't make the attack. But even PV has to make his plays with his opponent's thoughts about his Bone Crusher Giant in mind. So it's like a cool like back and forth with like, are you bluffing? If you have it, do I die? And at one point in the video, I know for a fact he says that even if I had the Bone Crusher, he would make this play anyways. So I just need to slam this card or X card or do this action because now it's just too late. My opponent already knows that my opponent can't play around the Bone Crusher anymore anyways, because if they go to 3 in this situation, they don't die to Bone Crusher, so they're going to do this play. It's kind of like a weird thing to think about, and it's a little bit convoluted to think about as well. Like, if you're not listening very carefully on the podcast or on YouTube right now, you might even miss that. But it's a very interesting back and forth for sure.
It's super interesting, and it comes up, more than people would think. How many times have you like watched a friend play where you're watching a Twitch streamer and so they go like, "That's a weird play. Why'd they do that?" And then the next turn it makes sense, right? They're like, "Oh, they had a Black Lance Paragon."
I love those situations actually, because I'm really good at like sniffing out things from my opponent. I go
trap cards will do that to you.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like I'm used to playing against trap cards because I'm an ex-Yu-Gi-Oh player. Yeah, I know. I set my trap and end my turn. No,
I passed the turn.
Especially with things like village rights in Historic. Like, I'm like, I know they have it. I just know they have it. Because, like, why would they ever make this play if they didn't have village rights? So now I'm at a point in the game where I'm like, okay, well, now I have to play around it. So that when they're tapped out, I like use a spell to kill their creature in my main phase because I know they have it. I mean, it's not a guarantee that they have it. They could just be doing the same thing we're talking about and, like, representing it.
Yeah.
Which is, like, next level. But certain things like when you think they have it and like you can't afford for them to have it, like what if they have a Mire Triton, even if you're in standard, right? If they have a Mire Triton and you have a Bone Crusher Giant and they just tap that on turn 2, or maybe it's turn 4 and you realized like in the earlier turns that they had a Village Rights, and they tapped out this turn because they know you're playing around Village Rights, so they just tap out because they're not going to get the value out of it anyways because they know you're playing around it. At that point, you should just play around it and kill their card right away, just so they don't have the value of getting rid of your Bone Crusher Giant with their Village Rights.
Yeah, and then you have to decide: did they draw like you? It kind of, this is where we get a little deep here, right? But like you also have to think about like, okay, if I know my opponent knows what's up, and they know I know what's up, did they draw a claim? Should I develop this Bone Crusher? Can I make a play that does something else that doesn't develop Bone Crusher and to claim it, sack it? Like that sort of thing comes up a good bit.
And especially
to kind of make good plays.
Yeah, you have to know against those decks that they're always setting up the claims. They're setting up the claim the firstborn sacrifice play. They're setting up the Crowan War sacrifice play or the Immerstern Predator sacrifice your thing after stealing a play. Like they're setting those things up especially if you're in Mythic. And then like it's this weird chess game where you're like, if you know they're setting it up and they know that you're setting it up, like what are those chess moves, right? Yeah. What are some things I want to ask you too? What are some things that you think about in those type of situations? Not necessarily just for the sacrifice situation. We can use that as an example if you want. Sure. But what are the things that you what are some heuristics that you think of when you know that they know what's up?
Well, first I think about, so this is a little disingenuous. I'm jumping into this game right now, but the whole game I've been thinking about what were the cards they would keep in their hand and stuff like that, right? So an example of this might be, let's say that the Black-Red Sacrifice deck had a 1-drop, just for the sake of argument, right? That they would play. They didn't play it. I'm like, okay, they don't have the 1-drop in hand. They played a Swamp, right?
Let's talk about Stitcher Supplier.
Stitcher, yeah, they pretend they have Stitcher Supplier in their deck, right? And so they don't play Stitcher Supplier. I'm like, okay, so I'm pretty sure they don't have Stitcher Supplier. That's their best turn 1 play. They would always do that on the play. So now I kind of like shrink their hand, like, okay, what kind of hand would they keep that didn't have a Stitcher Supplier? Because Stitcher Supplier does that sort of thing. And so I'm thinking about stuff like that the whole time. So now let's fast forward to the turn where, it's turn 4 and they play their Mire Trident or whatever creature it is that I can stomp, and, they're tapped out, so I'm not going to get the Village Rights. And we think they have the Village Rights given past information, right? I would then think, okay, I'm going to kill this Mire Trident while I have a chance, and, it's the end of their turn, so I get to use my mana on my turn, untap, draw. And can I make a play that will beat the Village Rights / claim the first? So can I make a play that would be able to beat claim? Because like I said, and like you said, right, they have a lot of those cards that like act as treason effects that will steal your cards and then be able to combo it. And as we mentioned, they're on like 4 mana, right? So a Crowan War plus Village Rights is totally doable. Claim plus it's super doable. Claim plus War Strider, maybe they had that instead of a Village Rights as the card in hand. Yeah. All very possible. Can I make a play that'll beat that, right? And maybe normally I don't play this, Planeswalker I have in my deck, right? At this point, maybe it's better to wait. But now I'm going to play it, and I'm actually going to tick up on it, right? I'm going to make a shard like it's Nika Aries. And now I'm going to do that instead of saving it as a kill spell, because this allows me to play to the board and use my mana and do that sort of thing while avoiding this play. Now, the other thing that might happen is okay, is this play actually good for me to do? because I might have a better card in hand, right? I might have this unbeatable 3-drop that I really don't want to get claimed. And so I'm like, okay, develop my tap land, play Bone Crusher. Oh no, you had the Akroan War. That's terrible. And so I'm going to think about what's the better thing there. And if I can't make a play that sidesteps it, and I don't have a play that I'm trying to like bait their play with their action, then I'm trying to think about, okay, should I make this play? Is it gonna, like, am I gonna die? Am I gonna get claimed and hit me with the giant and I die because I take 4 damage? Like, okay, no. And then it's like, all right, is there another play I can make? What's the most reasonable play to make? And then if all those things fail and I can't beat claim or I can't beat village rights or whatever it is in the situation, then I'm like, all right, I have to play like they don't have it because I can't win if they have those cards. And that's kind of the mental checklist, and you do that within 4 seconds or whatever. And
yeah,
that's what you go through. And so that's kind of how the order of operations would go in my head. But I think the real secret, and I think one thing that a lot of players don't do until they've heard it, is that I'm thinking about all this stuff though every turn of the game as the game's progressing forward. I don't have this situation appear and then think, oh, would they have claimed on turn 2 my 2? Like I'm thinking about what they could have, right? Like I'm actively, I'm an active participant in my game. I'm not a watcher of my game, right? This is why you see Twitch chat make some terrible plays sometimes, right? It's because what's most likely happened is someone joined maybe a turn or two ago, and they're like, slam your, Redain. You got to beat the Embercleave. And it's like, well, they probably have a claim the firstborn. They kind of played in a weird way. Yada, the play is not very good, right? Like, same sort of situation. I think the Twitch chat example is what happens when a lot of players aren't actively thinking about every turn and what their opponent's doing. So that's just a little small,
Right,
example.
right. Let's talk about streaming a little bit. Using the same thing that you just said. It might be difficult to stream and do that at the same time.
Yeah, it's very hard.
Go ahead and talk about your experiences trying to make those next level / high level game analysis decisions, and also talking to Twitch chat at the same time.
Yeah, well, the answer is I just don't. My play is just much worse on stream, as I know it is for a lot of players. I've gotten better with time. I've been streaming off and on irregularly now for like 4 years, something like that. I think we talked off stream, maybe we had to redo the recording a little bit, but I used to stream just have local people watch me or whatever. And like I get to hang out with friends, and I get feedback and stuff like that, and then I could watch my VOD. So at first I just wasn't really interacting with chat because the goal was like have a VOD that's just me playing and they get to watch if they want to watch for whatever reason, right? And we can talk about stuff after the game. But my goal being more entertainment focused now, I kind of sometimes don't really do that. Like it's awkward because on some level of it, it's subconscious on certain parts of that, and other levels it's definitely conscious. And sometimes I'll do things because like, oh, I feel like something weird happened, but I don't exactly know because I'm not actively thinking about it because I'm talking to Twitch chat or I'm doing a bit, right? Or I'm shilling for subs or whatever, like that sort of thing's happening, or et cetera, et cetera. We're listening to the sad Naruto music because they thought C's our best card, like stuff like that. I got my hand in my head for like the last 2 turns. I'm like clicking around, not even looking. I'm like trying to make a fun stream, not trying to play the best Magic I can. But it's really hard. I've played some things like MIQs. I streamed some of my Pro Tour that I played on Arena when that happened back in the summer-ish. And I did that with a delay and no chat, obviously, because of that. But even then, like when the round would start, it was kind of a moment to get back into gear. It was awkward and hard times, and so
I've definitely seen top level streamers, Reed Duke, Gabriel Nassif, LSV, etc. You name your pro streamer here, streamer / player, and they're just zero interaction with chat at all, and on a delay and things, which is perfectly fine if you understand the dynamic between streaming and playing competitively and being able to have those thought processes while you play your games. You just can't do that while you're talking to stream. You just can't.
It's so hard to at least do it and be good at one of the two things. You kind of have to pick your poison.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to say.
Biceps or thick thighs. I can't have both.
I think that's a good thing to mention, though. Even to listeners listening. If a streamer, if you're watching a streamer and they're in tournament mode, like they're not going to be able to respond to you as well as they would be if they weren't playing in a tournament. It's just a whole different mindset.
Yeah, I have like a channel reward where it's like rant about something for a minute, and like people love to cash that one in like when I'm trying to win or whatever. And I'm like, you're
That's
just gonna
funny.
have to wait, man. Yeah, you're on delay, like, oops, didn't see that. My bad, sorry. Like,
At that point, it's just a meme. It's
yeah,
just funny.
exactly. Yeah,
Let's go ahead and predate Magic here,
sure.
or predate streaming here. What do you like to do when you're not playing Magic? And we can talk about before you started playing Magic after that. What do you like to do when you don't play Magic?
So currently, right now, one of my favorite ways to spend my free time is I play Valorant a good bit. It's a really fun tactical shooter, kind of like CS, but from the League of Legends, more IP-ish, like abilities and stuff like that. That game's super fun. I recently got a bunch of friends into it. Kind of our like little Discord started all playing, so that's been super fun. So I've been playing a bunch of Valorant. Um, Besides that, I really like to watch like TV, movie, anime, stuff like that. Like I'm finally finishing up Hunter x Hunter. That was something I was actually doing right before you and I hopped on while I was grinding ladder with the Grixis stack. I was just watching some Hunter x Hunter. So I like doing that sort of thing. And then outside of that, it's kind of weird. Like, not weird. I work a full-time job. I'm a neurofeedback technician, so I work with kids that have ADHD at a private practice of psychiatry, and that takes up a good bit of time. And then it used to be before quarantine that I'd be like, go to work, come home, work on Magic, right? Like either the podcast or preparing for a tournament, and then travel on the weekend, then come back, right? And so things like the movies and stuff like that, and TV shows were good because that was something I could fit into my schedule during some of that, or like going to bed. But I don't really do a whole lot outside of that currently. I'm not a super well-rounded person.
I
So
mean, it's a busy life though.
yeah,
You have a job that requires a lot of effort. You have
I have
time.
side jobs that require a lot
Yeah,
of effort.
you have side
Yeah.
jobs. You have the podcast. You have streaming when you can. You have computers to manage and that break, and you have to get
Articles
into a
to write.
computer and
Yeah.
articles to write. There's a lot of things to do, right? And you just have to be
Yep.
able to manage your time. What are the things that you do personally that helps you manage your time?
It's funny. This was actually our Patreon question on this upcoming episode of Constructive Criticism.
Go
So if you want to
figure.
hear us talk about this more in depth, we have it there as well. But one of the things I do is and I mentioned this earlier. It's think about the goals and what I'm trying to do. Right, like when it comes to things like work, like that's like I need to be able to live and stuff like that. So that's like top priority, right? But like let's talk about this weekend's SCG, right? Like I knew that I had played a lot of Magic 2 weeks ago, but I knew I kind of wanted a little bit of a break. And I knew that I was going to do this podcast and that was going to take away one of the times I could do this satellite, right? So my goal for Magic this week shifted a little bit to I'll play the one SCG satellite at night. If I spike it, I like get a buy, I'll play on Sunday. Oh, I have all the SCGs for free because of Star City Games leaderboard from before quarantine. So I don't have to worry about money. So I can just play them if I want to play them. So I just registered the deck I played last week with like 2 changes. And I ended up not making it and then I was like, okay, cool. I just won't play this weekend, right? And so that's like an example of managing my time where it's like, hey, I can't do everything all the time and all these sort of things and give it my all. So I'm going to pull back on this so that I can, just kind of chill more, maybe watch some TV, hang out with friends, and not be so stressed and stuff like that. Because, when I'm playing these SGs and stuff, we spend a lot of time, like last week before the SCG on Sunday, we spent a couple hours talking about the Naya Adventure deck with Toski and stuff like that and how we wanted to build our deck and what our sideboard plans are. And we spent about 2.5 hours, talking about everything and getting the plans ready. And we spent about 45 minutes of that talking about should we play Temple of Plenty or Tangle Flora Hedron and what's better there. And like now that's an extreme example. It's normally not that grueling of a task to talk about the 2 card differences, but there were strong feelings and we had to hash it out, right? And we're playing for this thing that means a lot to a lot of us. We want to go to the Pro Tours again. We want to change these things. We want to, it's nice to win, some money as well. And it's like, okay, well, doing well at this means putting my time in, right? And is Temple of Plenty actually more helpful than Tangle Flora Hedron? Does like the mana fixing and the smoothing of the curve matter more than the times we accelerate our games? We play Tangle Flora Hedron as a tap forest a lot. Let's really dive into this and figure out where we stand and what we should be doing. And I think that was really helpful. And even, if it ends up not being the thing we play or switch or whatever, it's still kind of get that time in, And one of my friends got 13th on Breakers, right? So I feel really good about the time and stuff we put in. And yeah, it was, one more, we put ourselves in position to top 8 or whatever. We're top 12 for the SCG. So yeah, that's one of the ways I manage my time, is I just kind of make sacrifices where I need to and I pull back on stuff when I need to. So
I think it's important to put yourself in that like type of mental energy state where it's like you're okay with something not working out, right? I listen to a lot of Gary Vaynerchuk, if you've heard of him before, or Gary V for short. And one of the things that he says, and he's just if you haven't heard of him, he's a business guru, an early investor in Facebook and Uber and things like that, and has a very, very prominent YouTube channel about, he does some self-motivation and whatever. But one of the things that he says is that about the mental energy aspect of it is that in your head you're rotating 38 plates, but if 24 of them fall, you still have 14 plates, and you have to be like okay with the thought of 20 plates falling off, and you have to be okay with that. And in more of a situation of like me and you, or just someone grinding the SCG ladder, or trying to manage their time, if they have a full-time job and streaming and want to qualify for competitive events, but also want to make their stream as engaging as possible, you just can't do everything, right? So you have to be okay with maybe this week not qualifying for the SCG. Right, just like you were saying, but you also have next week and the week after, or the week after that, and it all boils down to patience, right? You have patience with yourself, with your stream, with your job, with everything. If you have so many plates, maybe this one plate falls off now, but you just put it back on, and 3 weeks down the line, or 3 months, or 3 years down the line, that plate will solidify itself there. And by play, I mean maybe you want to be a Twitch partner, maybe you want to be you want to have 1,000 viewers watching your channel, right? And even this applies to that if you want to have like huge goals, right? And you said you've been streaming for 4 or 5 years on and off, right?
Yeah.
And say one of your, I don't know if it is or not, but say one of your goals is, we'll talk about this later, but or Twitch partner, or 1,000 viewers, or 3,000 viewers. That's a lot, right? It's like a crazy goal. But you have to be okay in your mind for that to not happen for 3, 5, 10 years, or maybe not ever happen. And and going micro now instead of macro, going to what you were just saying, I want to reiterate this about not qualifying for the SCG. You have to be just okay in your mind for it not to work out.
Yeah, it's just incredibly likely that could happen, right? Like, you could just lose some games of Magic. Like, it's not hard to qualify for the SCGs, but you could lose. It could happen,
And I don't think you can beat yourself up that bad about it. Just try again next week.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, and if you had something where you messed up or whatever, then, okay, you messed up. You're a human. These things happen. Let's work on to improve that and fix that. How can we fix that thing that we messed up, right? How do we work on making sure that thing happens less likely than before? Because it's not like we're going to remove errors from ourselves. We just want to minimize them and try and make those things not happen as much as before and learn from them and improve. So,
and pro players make mistakes all the time. Like, you'll hear Gabriel Nassif say, "Oh my gosh, I'm the worst player ever," and like just say stuff like that. And on his stream, just like, "Oh my gosh, that was so bad." I feel like I hear him say that was terrible or that was so bad, like at least 2 or 3 times per stream.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories about this, and I love it because sometimes you hear at like the local level or something like that, where you hear people like, "Oh, these pros never make mistakes," and yada yada yada, and I'm like, well, they do, but they just don't beat themselves up over it. Because my favorite story of it ever is I'm sitting next to Sam Black. We're playing in SCG. I've won, but I want to watch Sam's game, and Sam's playing, and his opponent puts Ashiok from War of the Spark on the stack, the one where you can't search your deck, right? And we're in Modern, so there's a lot of fetch lands. And so Sam goes, in response, I'll fetch before Ashiok. And Sam has 2 fetch lands. So Sam looks through their deck, looks over, grabs a breeding pool, puts into play tapped, shuffle, presents the cut, and it just says resolve. And then goes, oh. There's another fetch land in play. I forgot to fetch it. Well. Oops. It just happened. It happened to anyone. It's not the end of the world. And Sam ends up barely losing that game, but Sam learned to make sure to double check things again. It's fine to get a refresher.
Yeah, I mean, one of the I'm not a pro player by any means, but I did really good in Yu-Gi-Oh. But relating this to Magic, I know I can count on stream like at least once or twice per stream that I'm just like, why didn't I think about that for one more second? Like, like I just need to. I tell myself I need to learn to think one extra second, because I'll make a misplay and I'll just know it's misplaying like as my fingers leaving the mouse click. Yeah, I'm just like,
just take a beat.
Oh, just take a second, like half a second. And I feel like that has a lot to do with it too. Like just take a second, evaluate the situation. Even if you're about to make a play, just like think about it like one more time really quick, and you'll make half the mistakes as you did if you're just playing super quick, I think.
They don't give you bonus points for finishing first.
Yeah.
Like I had 30 more minutes on my arena clock than my opponent, and I lost. It's not like they're like, oh, you had 30 more minutes. You get a game 4 in real quick. It's like it's like all right, you had 30 minutes. You chose not to use it. Them are the rules. I'm sorry.
It's like look at that. My opponent won with 10 seconds left on the clock. I had 30. Oh my gosh, that's insane. I'm just such a better player than them because I thought quicker.
It's crazy how many people get frustrated their opponent takes a long time. Like, yes, that could be frustrating in the minute, especially if you're dead on board and you're waiting for this to turn sideways. But like, I don't know, you signed up to play the Magic tournament. You're gonna be there all day. What did you think was gonna happen? Like you drove to Minnesota. You got your hotel, and now your opponent's taking like 2 seconds longer than maybe they should because they're a little anxious where they're just double checking to make sure you don't have like a lightning bolt or whatever. And now you're upset at them. It's like, you're going to be in this hall for 40 minutes complaining to your friends about how bad they were. Shut up. It's fine. Chill.
And what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Go back to your hotel? No, you're going to sit here, go to the vending machine, get a Coke, get like a $7 Coke and a slice of bread, and you're going to come back and talk to your friends. Like, what else are you going to be doing?
Yeah, exactly. It's not the end of the world. Chill.
I mean, also, I do miss those times where you could just go to an event in a venue and pay $7 for a drink and talk to your friends about how bad your opponent was.
1 year. Let's hope.
All right. Well, let's go ahead.
I'm vaccinated. I'm ready to go. You got the vaccine? Want to play?
Right, let's go.
I'm ready. I need y'all to catch up.
Talk about before Magic. Talk about maybe your history of playing card games in general, if you play one before Magic, or maybe just like how you got into Magic in the first place. Start before you started playing card games and go to how you learned about Magic and how you started playing.
So I've played card games most of my life. So when I was a kid, I remember really liking the show Yu-Gi-Oh! And I watched the anime and I played cards with my friends, didn't know what was going on, whatever. And then my parents got divorced and I was at my dad's apartment. And I remember I'm like maybe 11 or 12 at this point. And my dad's like, I want to play Yu-Gi-Oh! With my friends or whatever, but like I can't because I'm at his place. And he's like, well, they have tournaments for that thing. Like maybe there's a store I can take you to and you can find somebody to play with. And he took me to the next little games at Bellevue, and it like changed my life. It's like this moment where like you don't know at the time, but you look back, it like changed everything, right? And I played there for a while, and I stopped during high school because I needed to focus on that sort of thing. And then when I graduated high school, I went back and I played some Yu-Gi-Oh! For a little bit. I remember I had like the Heroes deck with the black cards that go on top of each other. XYZs.
Yep, Elemental Heroes.
Yeah. Well, then I had that. Then I had the wind-up deck for a little bit.
Yep.
I played that for a while. So, and then I switched to this game called Card Fight Vanguard. And Card Fight Vanguard, I think, is one of my favorite games I've ever played. But it's this game from this company called Bushiroad that came out of Japan. And it's very fun. It's very exciting. And it kind of has a smaller community, whatever. But I played that for a while and did it very well, that sort of game. Friends went to like Worlds and stuff like that, consistently topping events, et cetera, creating a lot of content for that game, a lot of stuff there. And then near the end, the middle-ish end of that, the tail end, I should say, I had a girlfriend at the time who played Magic. And I hadn't really played Magic. I had played like Duels of the Planeswalker on my Xbox a little bit, so I kind of knew it was up, but not really. And she was like, I want to do the pre-release. So it's really the classic Magic player story. Boy meets girl, girl teaches boy Magic. Probably don't even need to mention that.
Yeah, classic.
And so then I did the pre-release with her. I remember I opened Domri from Original Gatecrash, which is a pretty good Planeswalker. And I had a bunch of the like Gore Clan Rampager, this big 4/4 that you could buff for +4/+4. But I didn't know how the mechanic worked, Bloodthirst. And so I just played them all as creatures. And I like post-combat basically play a creature that would have pump spell killed them in attacks. And my opponent goes, why didn't you blood rush that? And they're like very upset or whatever because they're just going to die to it being a 4/4. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. This is a 4/4. I'm going to play it as a 4/4 for 4. It's quite good as that. I've been winning all day with it. Can you teach me what that means? And then they taught, and I was like, oh, sick. And I like used it in game 2 against them. I was like, I'll pump spell my guy.
Yep.
But yeah, so I did that. And I played, and I've been playing Magic basically ever since. But I've always played strategy games and stuff like that. I used to grind, like there was this Xbox game called Halo Wars, which was a real-time strategy game based just on the Xbox, and I played that a lot and did very well at that game. And I've just always been drawn to that sort of thing. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and that transitioned into you playing Magic now, and you've been playing Magic for how long now?
So I like to say since Theros, I mentioned that story Gate Crash being the pre-release, but I only played a little bit then, and I didn't get to play too much. So whenever Theros came out, which I guess is 7 years ago now, somewhere in that time, 6-7 years, that's when I started playing. And yeah, I've been playing ever since. And I started really playing competitive Magic and trying to queue for the Pro Tour and stuff about 2.5 years ago. I was playing kind of casually before because I was still doing Vanguard. And getting into my job and everything like that, finishing school. And let's see, so I started, that would be like what, 2.5 when Amonkhet came out. I remember my first, I don't know if you know about PPTQs, how far back your listeners go.
I played in one of those.
You played one? Okay, so you know what they were. So I remember my first one of those that I was really going to try at, because I had played them casually, and I like, sick brags incoming, but I'd always top 8'd them, but I never did really well because you got to top 8, and that's when people knew how to play, and I would lose, right? Like, it was people that actually practiced.
Sick brag.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. It's not the end of the world. But so I remember the one I wanted to really play, and I had the Felidar, the copycat deck.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't ban my deck on Tuesday, and I was like, all right, this is the deck. I've been playing this. I'm ready to go. And by Thursday, I'd banned my deck. I needed to find a new deck to queue with, And so I was like, I gotta figure something out. But yeah, I've been playing since then. So I guess that's 3 years now. It's all kind of a blur because of quarantine. I feel like it's longer because quarantine's messing up my numbers, so I'm not exactly sure how long. I tell time in Magic sets, and now this one set per year thing is really hard. It's like, yeah, I don't know. I think we're on Innistrad, but maybe it's just really we're going too many places. It makes my calendar very bad.
Actually, we have a cool thing in common. I started playing Magic competitively, or trying to at least, was my first competitive tournament actually was a deck that I built myself. The black red aggro deck that played Scrap Heap Scrounger, Bomat Courier, Pia Nalar or whatever. Glorybringer and Hazaret. That was during Amonkhet as well, but it had been after Aether Revolt, right? It had been after Rampaging Ferocidon got banned, but it was the PPTQ after that. And I threw together some Viashino Pyromancer burn version of that with shocks and lightning strikes and stuff in it. My first competitive tournament ever, and I got second place and lost to someone named Brad Carpenter in the finals.
It's a good one to lose to.
Yeah. So I lost him in the mirror match in the finals. It wasn't really a mirror match because I played a lot more burn cards than him, but he did this whole convoluted Pia Nalar, sacrifice Scrap Heap Scrounger to give this card unblockable, and then bring the Scrap Heap Scrounger back, and then keep doing that for 4 times and attack for lethal. And I was flabbergasted. That was insane. And we had a crazy board state too. We each had 8 creatures on the board. It was like a board stall. And then he just did that all in one turn. I had no idea what was coming. But that was
just like, what?
Yeah. That's my first competitive tournament. I did one sealed pool and one Amonkhet draft before that, when I built this really bad Archfiend of Ifnir cycling deck. I mean, it was actually pretty good, but it was bad because I was bad.
Sure.
But that was the first one that I played in, and it was cool that you said that you started wanting to play competitively back in Amonkhet as well. So it was kind of cool that we kind of started at the same time. Now, I moved back and forth with Yu-Gi-Oh! In between a bunch of times, but I eventually got back into Magic. And what is one of the reasons why you think you stuck with Magic over Cardfight Vanguard and Yu-Gi-Oh?
We'll skip the Yu-Gi-Oh one. No, but for Cardfight Vanguard, their competitive scene and the way they wanted to push the game just wasn't really in line with me. And I had some conversations with their team that was leading that sort of thing, and I realized that it was never going to be what I wanted it to be. And there was ARG, which was kind of ARG because of Yu-Gi-Oh, but they ran
games.
I got my second place Nationals trophy from Vanguard right here.
Oh, that's a great trophy. I don't have an ARG trophy, but I did top 8 an ARG event.
Nice. Yeah, I only lost one match all weekend. That was the finals. I went 2-0 everybody till the finals. It was a fairly unfortunate way to have the perfect story. Especially when I thought it was going to be one of my last tournaments at the time too. I was like, I'm just going to go out on an undefeatable. That's going to be sick.
But it didn't happen.
No, but didn't lost the last one.
I'm bringing back
It's
these
rough.
memories now.
Yeah, I'm gonna go watch on YouTube after this and just eat 20
Reminisce.
McNuggets and cry. No, but so yeah, they just weren't gonna do what I wanted, and even though ARG did 2 out of 3 stuff and whatnot, it just was never gonna be what I wanted, and I just kind of had to accept that. And I've always liked competing in that sort of thing. And I like strategy games, and so Magic was like the final frontier in a lot of ways, right? Like I like playing chess, but I don't really want to compete at chess because it's kind of like the better player always wins, and I don't actually like that. I think it's good that Magic has variance, and so I like that Magic that I could play against someone completely new and I could lose. I actually really like that aspect of the game. I know a lot of other players don't, but for me that's really cool, and I think that's a fun part of it. So Magic was the final frontier in a lot of ways, and so I've come here to compete and stuff like that, and that's where we are.
That's awesome. That's I've kind of have a similar story in a way that I collected Pokemon cards to start, and then transitioned to Yu-Gi-Oh, and then transitioned to Magic, and then didn't stop playing Magic.
Okay.
Like I don't know what it is about it, but it's actually very different than Yu-Gi-Oh, but it also has some similarities. And but I've always been interested in the competitive aspect of it. And even now that I'm streaming, it's less competitive and more entertainment, but I still like to put a competitive spin on that. And I know you do as well on your streams, and a lot of other streamers that are kind of competitively focused, but they're also entertainment based. I really like that way of streaming. I know I can name a few people off the top of my head. Wyatt Darby's very competitive, and he's also very entertaining. And he has a competitive based stream, like Ben Stark, competitive based stream. Even if it's not constructed and it's limited, and there's not like too many tournaments for limited, right? He's still super competitive, and he's very good and explains all of his plays. Jeff Hoagland usually has a very competitive yet entertainment part of his streams, and I think that's what maybe I gravitate towards because I like the competitive aspect of it. How do you feel about like pure entertainment streams, or like maybe more spike competitive streams? Let's talk about streaming a little bit. And
sure.
What do you?
It's called StreamCast.
It's called StreamCast for a reason,
Yeah.
right? What do you like best about the competitive aspect of streaming? I know we touched about it like a little bit before, but maybe when you watch streams, or maybe when you stream yourself, how do you feel about the competitive aspect of streaming? Like even while you're streaming, or even that concept in general, right? Like you can stream Magic and be competitive, but you can be like solely competitive. Like you're an SEG grinder, or you're like an actual pro player, and the whole we talked about before, don't communicate as much with chat, but like is very, very competitive. Like if you want to learn the highest level of Magic, you watch them, even if it's not like the entertainment capital of Twitch, right? And also the other hand of where it's like super entertaining, but like maybe not the best player, or they don't care as much about teaching the game as much as other streamers do. Where do you lie in that? What do you like watching, and what do you like to do yourself?
Ooh, well, so it's interesting. So one of the ways I think I was able to jumpstart Magic and catch up or whatever is that I would watch a lot of stuff that is maybe not the most exciting content in the world, but that you could be really informative and stuff. And so what would happen is I would watch VODs, and I would pause and I would think about what I would do, and then I would unpause and listen to what they said, and I would pause, repause, and I kept doing that. I would just pause every move. Yeah. And so basically you're like playing along, it's kind of like the cyborg thing I mentioned earlier, but like a different example. And I actually don't like that content. I find it incredibly boring, and it's like doing your homework. And I think for a lot of players, and at least a player in my position, that's not the most effective way to learn or whatever anymore. And I get much more out of having conversations with other players who are good and stuff like that. And I'm beneficial and fortunate enough to have that opportunity to do that sort of thing. And so watching streams that are solely focused on that are incredibly boring for me. And it's why my streams aren't doing it that way, because I make content that I want to watch, right? And so I don't want a stream that's only focused on that sort of thing. And so I want something that where someone's trying. I don't want to watch like Minotaur Tribal and Standard or whatever. But I do want to watch someone who's like trying to interact with chat and trying to have fun, trying to do stuff, right? Like when I talked about playing blindfolded on stream, right? Like on the pre-show, and like having a friend talk over it. That sounds like a more fun than competitive. If I want something that leans more on that side than before. So I think the streamer that does it best is I think Ash Lizzle is the best Magic streamer personally by like a lot. And I think Ash plays competitive Magic and does her thing and is good at it. And she also makes sure to like meme around with chat and have music going and do that sort of thing and kind of creates an atmosphere. And her stream and Allie's stream are probably the streams that I watch some of the most of. But I don't want to like, bash anybody, but there are certain people who just kind of sit there, they vape, they play some Magic. They're like kind of good, but not really. And then they're like pretty medium. And then like people watch them and it's like, cool, that's dope. I'm glad you like that. I can't do that. So that's not the me thing, I much prefer entertainment. I think that's good. And I think there's still some stuff to be learned. I think the trick is that if you focus solely on competitive, unless you're someone like Matt Nass, Nassif, Reduke, someone like that, unless you're one of those players, the difference in quality and stuff that someone else can learn from watching you is not worth the loss in entertainment. I think you have to be really high up for the other people to get stuff, or even have the potential to maybe grasp something that you're not explaining to them for them to get. They kind of have to figure it out for themselves in some ways. And I think they can learn a lot of that similar stuff while having a more fun time. And I think having more fun time is good and can engage in Magic that way. It's kind of like it's better to get 15 minutes of walking in a day than to get no time, right? Like it's better to do a little than a lot,
right?
That you hate. So that's kind of where I fall in that sort of thing. So that's my long-winded way of saying I kind of like a little bit more entertainment than competitive. But there are streams out there that you can find that strike a good balance.
I think one of the most entertaining streamers that I've watched, and I've actually showcased him on the StreamCast podcast before, is DZMTG. One of the most entertaining people. Like he has the chat commands that make extra, that make like noises, and the chat goes crazy about them, different clips, and like his Discord is like full of clips, and it's just like just the head with the full green suit. Like if you want to be like entertained to the max, I mean he's also a very good Magic player. Don't get me wrong, but I think my favorite like watch for the entertainment value of it has to be DZ. And watch for the watch for the competitive side of it is probably, I mean, even Nassif is very competitive, but he also has he's also like a really good memer too.
Yeah.
So his chat's also entertaining. So and Ash Lizzle's very entertaining too. But I think if I wanted to just like be better at Magic, in general, I think there's 3 streams that I would watch probably, and that has the best like chat engagement. That also is very good at playing Magic, and also makes it a point to like be a teacher of the game instead of just playing the game and expecting you to realize what's happening and learn that way. I think is Wyatt Darby, and Ben Stark, and Chris Patello. I think those 3 do a very, very good job at articulating their plays and what they're thinking while doing their interactions, and actually just will make you a better Magic player just by watching them, even if it's limited or constructed, I think. And if you haven't watched them before, if you're listening on this, go check them out. And if you really want someone to like articulate their thoughts through it. But I mean, some streamers don't do that, and to each their own. Super pro players don't probably have to do that. You're gonna watch them because you want to get better at Magic, and a lot of the time they're gonna be doing plays that even the Wyatt Darbys of the world. I mean, even though Wyatt Darby is a former Pro Tour player, even current Pro Tour player, might miss or whatever. There's and what I like the most about Magic in general is there's probably the most diversity with streamers that I think I've noticed through any card game. In Yu-Gi-Oh, it doesn't have really a big Twitch following. I was looking yesterday about Yu-Gi-Oh! That's like 80 viewers was like the #1 channel, and then it went down to like 20 for #2. So it just like doesn't have a prevalence online at all. I don't know about Cardfight Vanguard if they have a thing like that, but
they don't have an online client that you can really use anymore. It's kind of like, I think it was Dueling Network was the thing before for Yu-Gi-Oh! I want to say
it's Dueling Book now.
Dueling Book, okay, sure. So like Vanguard doesn't have one of those anymore, so it's kind of hard. But they actually had a client on Steam for a little bit, and they just kind of killed the project, unfortunately.
Oh, unfortunate. But
yep.
Yeah, those
numbers were good on
just...
that when I streamed.
What was that?
Numbers were good when they had that. I was averaging 200 or whatever.
Wow,
that was
that's
easy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
They should have kept that going.
Like, please, Vanguard, please.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking about stacking things on top of each other, like the Exceeds for Yu-Gi-Oh!
Mhm.
It's a whole different story about Vanguard and stacking cards on top of each other. I tell you what. I would look at my local card game store, which is Cool Stuff Inc., and look at some card fight Vanguard players playing, and like there's like 10 cards stacked on top of each other.
There are mechanics where your goal is to put things underneath in the soul. That was like decks that had focus on doing that and then pulling cards out from it, and so
Um, yeah,
it's a whole thing.
it was very confusing to me. So I was like, whatever, I'll leave that to the side. Leave
Yeah,
that for them. Um,
yeah,
let's talk about. So let's keep it on the streaming topic here.
of
What
course.
are some advices, or maybe it's just one? Like, what's the maybe top two things that you could say to someone that wants to start streaming or has just started streaming, in order to either help their mindset or help their just growth as a streamer in general? Maybe touch on both topics.
Sure. I think the first thing to do is once again to figure out what you want streaming to be, right? And I might I'm going to steal this from Ludwig. I would get a piece of paper and a pen right now, and I would write down your three favorite streamers, and I would put a date and just start streaming then and look at their content and see what you can do. I think that's just like a good way to get going. It's good to start something, even if it's not great. Like I've been streaming for a while. I don't have a huge following. Like your last person was the Asian Avenger on here, right? And like the difference between our viewership is huge, astronomical. But like I still get Twitch payouts or whatever, right? Like it's not the end of the world, and you can be your own content creator, do your own thing, and have your own success. Just define it, and so figure out what you want to do and just go for it. And if you're looking to grow and stuff like that, I think the number one thing you can do is plan content for YouTube. YouTube is way bigger than Twitch. Like in every aspect, for every one person on Twitch, there's 100 on YouTube, and that's true for Magic as well. You look at people like Covert Go Blue, and their YouTube following is huge, and they have a good Twitch size as well, but it's literally just massive in comparison. And Covert Go Blue streams and does YouTube content daily, and having consistent YouTube content is a good way to push people towards your other stuff and kind of push out. So I would do that. I think that's a big way to help. And then I think when it comes to the like actual other things you could do, just make sure you're making content that you like. If you're not making content you like, it's crazy. And I see like people in chat talking about like, make sure there's no dead air, yada, 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 all those sort of things. Super important, super big. That sort of stuff makes the world of a difference. A difference between uploading a raw VOD and having even like a cutout match is sometimes, difference in a lot of viewers and a lot of traction. So that sort
Right.
of thing I think are big things.
Let's talk about some of your goals.
Sure.
Do you have any streaming goals and or actual Magic goals, and what are they?
Sure. So once again, my big goal, like we talked about earlier in the stream, is when it's all said and done, I want to be happy with the stuff and the time and the work I put in. And so I'm always working towards that. I got offered to take the play design test about 2 years ago now, because thanks to quarantine. And I got told I need to do some more tournament stuff. So I'm going to try to get more tournament results, stuff like that, and do that sort of thing, and try and work towards that. But I really would like to be a part of Magic. I think Magic's one of the best games ever, if not the best. And I really want to be a part of it for as long as I can be. And whether that's like with the cards or doing commentary and stuff like that, I would love to transition into one of those things eventually. But the more short-term goals are sorry about that is to get the just get more tournament finishes. Honestly, I have an SCG top 8, I have a regionals top 8, and I missed like after that first top 8, I missed like 3 more win-ins for top 8. I want to do that sort of thing more. I want to play more pro tours. I just kind of want to compete more. I really like right now, thanks to quarantine, competing is higher than everything on those. I just want to battle against people. That's what I really want to do. But I know that if I think about it realistically, those are the other bigger goals. So that's kind of where I'm at when it comes to Magic and stuff like that.
Now I have a couple questions here for you. One is more important than the other. I'm going to tell you that. All right, let's just go into
Sure.
it. Number one is, and this is the least important one, even though it is important. It's just less important than my next question. Where can we find you on social media?
Well, it's easy. You go to everywhere, Mason E. Clark, except for Twitch, which someone has the Mason E. Clark account, but twitch.tv/the Mason Clark, so you find me on Twitch. On Twitter, @Mason E. Clark. The podcast, you can find it everywhere as Constructed, like the format, and then Criticism. And you can find us on Twitter there at CCMTG. You can find me on Card Kingdom every Thursday with a new strategy or deck article at cardkingdom.com/blog. And then you can find me, of course, on YouTube at youtube.com Mason Clark. I pop up. So,
all right. The next more important question here.
Hit me.
Is pancakes or waffles?
Pancakes. Not close. Next question.
That is the best answer I've ever heard.
You know why? Because it's the correct answer. That's why.
Okay. It is the correct answer. And thank you for joining the Pancake Gang. We have one more Pancake Gang member. I think Pancake is over waffles at this point. Why is it pancakes over waffles? Give me the best reason. Go.
If you have to ask, you know what I mean? No, but I mean, it's just superior. Here's the thing about pancakes. They're fluffy. You can do them a lot of different ways. You can put a lot of different things in them, and you can do the same for waffles. And that's what the waffle people want you to think. But waffles, they get harder and staler quicker than pancakes. And once they are much worse. You ever have a room temperature pancake? Not as good as a hot pancake, still eatable. Room temperature waffle, put it in the trash. Pecans in your waffle, put it in the trash. Room temperature, it's bad. Got in your pancake, good. Still edible though. Important differential.
Yes, I agree. If you listen to my other podcast episodes, I talk about this with a lot of other streamers as well. And this is the main question I ask, okay? Because I get to find out a lot about their personalities here. The waffle is strictly worse because it's inconsistent. Even if you go to a restaurant, you never know what you're going to get. It could be hard. It could be stale. And also, if you get a pancake, it's consistently awesome. And even if it is like even if it did set out for a second and it wasn't hot, it's still edible. Pancakes just actually awful.
Sorry, do you mean waffles are actually awful?
Oh yeah. I meant waffles are actually awful if they sit out. I didn't mean pancakes.
Yeah.
Pancakes are the best. They're super consistent, super fluffy. You can do whatever you want with them. The same thing with pancakes, like you said. But with waffles, they get stale super fast. And plus, have you ever bought a frozen pancake? I don't think so. Waffles come frozen all the time, and you can in restaurants even make these frozen waffles. Okay.
Yeah. Also, when the waffle is like fresh and it messes up, it just looks worse than the pancake, right? And it's like you might not think that matters, but then again, think about every time you not drink that green drink at some place, because it looked worse. Same thing.
Psychological. Oh yeah, for sure. Well, now we found out the true correct answer, and you don't have to be banned from my channel from now on because you picked the right answer. Thank you for joining us on the StreamCast Podcast, episode 12, Mason. I really appreciated having you on.
Thank you for having me on. I had a great time, and I hope I, was able to entertain the listeners enough, and hopefully we imparted some knowledge on them at the same time. A little 1-2 buckaroo.
1-2 buckaroo. All right, perfect.
I keep it a buck, I keep it honest around here. That's
oh, yeah.
My friends say, why are you always saying keeping a buck? I'm keeping it a buck. Honest, 100%. You know how it be.
Oh, yeah.
I'm hip with the Zoomer. Word.
All right. We will see you for the next StreamCast in 1 week.